So good morning to all of you. Mr. Tsoumokas, yesterday we all agreed that the world begins with understanding of maps. And you have done something harder. You have made the world come to the map. Because bringing Delphi to Slemani is not just an event. It is an argument that the places that matter the most are precisely the ones where the conversation has been missing. So thank you for making this room possible. Thank you so much. Lawrence Friedman, good morning to all of you, one of the great scholars of strategy these days, argues that strategy is not a plan. A plan assumes you know what comes next. Strategy is what you do when you don't know. It is the art, the strategy of navigating between what you want and what the world will actually give you, between intention and friction, between the future you designed and the one you arrived instead. That tension is exactly what this panel is all about. The Middle East and this region specifically is attempting one of the most ambitious strategic turnarounds in modern economic history, moving from an economy built on what is under the ground to one built on what comes from the sun and the wind. So the question is not simply, can we transition to renewables? The question is, can we transition fast enough and wisely enough? So to work through it, I'm joined by His Excellency Begar Talabani, Ahmed Mufti, Anna Birchal, and Michalis Matioulakis. Let's start with the first question. Does the Middle East, in this region, actually have a strategy for energy transition, or do we have a collection of projects, targets, announcements that we have agreed to call a strategy?
سرەتا زۆر سپاس بۆ جەنابێت بۆ ڕێکخەرانی ئەم کۆڕبەندە و بۆ برای گەورە و ئازیزم کاقوبات تاڵەبانی دیارە هەرێمی کوردستان لە چوارچێوەی وڵاتی عێراقدا و عێراقیش لە چوارچێوەی وڵاتانی ناوچەکە لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاستدا بە دڵنیاییەوە کاریگەرن بەو گۆڕانکاریانەی کە ئێستا لە ناوچەکەدا و لە سەرئاستی جیهان ڕوودەدەن. گۆڕانکاریەکان گۆڕانکاری گەورە و بەرچاون و لە نێویشیدا چ گۆڕانکاریەکانی کەش و هەوا بێت، چ گۆڕانکاریەکانی بەرەو پێشچوون و یاخود گواستنەوەی قۆناغی وزە بۆ وزەی بەکارهێنرا و کەم کاربۆن بێت، چ گۆڕانکاریەکان بێت بۆ دەستەبەرکردنی ئاسایشی خۆراک یاخود ئاسایشی ئاو لە ناوچەکەدا. ئەمانە کۆمەڵێک ئاڵنگاری زۆر گەورن کە هەرێمی کوردستانیش لە چوارچێوەی عێراقدا بە دڵنیاییەوە ڕوبەڕووی ئەم ئاڵنگاریانە دەبێتەوە. ئێمە دەزانین وڵاتانی ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست لە چوارچێوەی جیهاندا دەکرێت بڵم هەستیارترین ناوچەیە بە گۆڕانکاریەکان بە تایبەتی بۆ وزە، بۆ ئاو، بۆ خۆراک. ئەمەش وا دەکات کە استراتیژی کارکردن لەم ناوچەیە بە بەراورد بە ناوچەکانی تر بۆ چۆنیەتی ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی ئاڵنگاریەکان جیاوازتر بێ. بە تایبەتی ئێمە دەزانین یەکێک لە گۆڕانکاریە هەرە سەرەکیەکان کە تەأسیراتی گەورەی لەسەر ناوچەکە دروست کردووە بە تایبەتی گۆڕانکاری کەش و هەوایە. ئەم گۆڕانکاریە بۆتە هۆکارێکی سەرەکی بەوەی کە ببێتە تێکچوونی جۆرێک لە شیرازەی چۆنیەتی بیرکردنەوەی کۆمەلگاکان تەنانەت بۆ دانانی ئەو ڕێکارانەی کە پێویستن بۆ ئایندە چۆن هەنگاو بنین. ئێمە لە ئێستادا پێویستمان بەوەیە کە لە چۆنیەتی بیرکردنەوەی خۆمان لە استراتیژ و ڕوئیە و ئایندەبینی و لە چۆنیەتی دروستکردنی نێوەندێکی هاوبەشی هەرێمی بۆ چۆنیەتی ئەو گۆڕانکاریانەی کە ڕوو دەدەن لەگەڵ یەکتریدا هاوبەشی بکەین. زۆر جار ئێمە دەبینین لە بەشێکی ئەم جیهانە کاتێک کە کێشەیەک دروست دەبێت، چ لە بواری ئابووری بێت، چ لە بواری ناکۆچیە سیاسیەکان بێت، یاخود ململانەکان بێت، یاخود کە جەنگ دێتە ئاراوە، ئێمە لە هەرێمی کوردستان ترسی ئەومان لێ دەنیشێت کە چۆن دەتوانین ئاسایشی خۆراک و ئاوی خۆمان دەستەبەر بکەین. و حقیقەتێکیش هەیە کە ئێمە ناتوانین نادیدەی بگرین، ئەویش ئەوەیە کە بەرژەوەندی هاوبەشی نێوان وڵاتانە بە تایبەتی لە ناوچەکەدا. ئێمە خاوەنی بەرژەوەندیەکی هاوبەشین لەگەڵ یەکتری. بۆ نمونە ئەگەر من نمونەیەک بهێنمەوە، مەلەفی ئاو یەکێکە لە مەلەفە هەرە سەرەکیەکان کە گەشەی ئابووری و تەندروستی گشتی، گەشەی کۆمەڵایەتی، تەنانەت سەقامگیری کۆمەڵایەتیشی پێوەبەندە. بەڵام ئەمە یەکێکە لە بنەماهەرە هاوبەشەکان لە نێوان وڵاتەکانی ناوچەکەدا کە زۆر جار سەردەکێشێ بۆ دروستبوونی ناکۆچی و بۆ گرفت و ئاڵنگاری گەورە. ئەگەر دوور نەڕۆین عێراق یەکێکە لە وڵاتانەی کە بەشێک لە سەرچاوە ئاویەکانی لە وڵاتانی ترەوە دێتە ناو خاکەکەی، بۆیە زۆر جار گرتنەوەی ئەم سەرچاوە ئاویانە بە دروستکردنی خەزانی گەورە یا خۆتگۆڕینی ڕێڕەوەکان دەبێتە هۆکاری ناکۆچی. کەواتە گۆڕانکاریەکان بە شێوازێکی گشتی ئەگەر ئێمە سەیریکەین چی لە مەسلەی دەستەبەرکردنی ئاسایشی خۆراک، چی لە گۆڕانکاری کەشوهەوا، چی لە گواستنەوەی وزە بە شێوازێک کە دەور و تەسیراتێکی گەورەی هەیە، چونکە وڵاتانی ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست بە درێژایی مێژوو پشتیان بەستووە بە نەوت و گاز. و ئەم هۆکارەش سەرچاوەیەکی سەرەکی بۆ ئەوەی کە ینی دیاردەی پیسبوونی ژینگەی ڕووبدا و لە ئێستا خەباتی ئەوان یاخود ڕێکارەکانی کە دەتوانن بیگرنە بەر بۆ ئەوەیە کە بتوانن چۆنیەتی کاریگەریەکانی ئەم گۆڕانە لەسەر ژینگەی وڵاتان کەم بکەنەوە. کەواتە ئێمە پێویستمان بە لێگەیشتنێکی هەرێمی هەیە بۆ ئەوەی بتوانین ئیدارەی گۆڕانکاریەکان بە شێوازێکی دروست بدەین و ئەم ئیدارەیەش بەوە دەکرێت کە ئێمە چۆن دەتوانین بە پلان و بەرنامەیدا ڕێژرا و کاری لەسەر بکەین.
The other participant, yes. So do we have a strategy or just a collection of projects?
Thank you very much. I would like to emphasize on His Excellency's speech just now. He emphasized 3 times that we cannot rely on oil alone. So the answer, yes, we have an idea how to lead this transition. However, there is no one solution for all. So the transition in GCC region is different than transition in Egypt, and so transition in Turkey, and so transition even in Iraq. In Slemani is different than in Basra. But I believe that the whole region in Middle East and political leaders, we all believe that the transition is a must. The question is how, which method, and how every nation has its own plan to lead the transition, and it's quite competitive as well.
What is your personal question to this answer to this question? How?
How is, I would like to emphasize on this region, especially on Slemania, and how the leadership in Slemania has tried to lead this transition. To lead the transition, you need a vision on energy. It is not anymore oil, it's oil and gas. And how we can lead the gas. Gas is a beautiful key to lead this transition. It's a clean energy source. For example, last year, exactly here, we highlighted the project of economic diversification to replace fuel-based industry in Slemania area, to replace it by gas. And we highlighted this last year in Delphi, and successfully, and I would like to mention this today, the region has signed 8 gas sales agreement with the industry in Slemania area to replace heavy fuel oil-based industry by natural gas. That means not only that the GDP will increase, this doesn't mean that the jobs will increase, jobs creation, but also thousands of metric tons of carbon in the air is being cut. So the challenges of climate change and economic diversification is met by a very short time. I believe in the next 5 or 10 years, Iraq in general can focus more on this economic transition, and there are some very serious challenges for Iraq as nation and as country. And one of them is the oil and gas law that needs to be led and finalized in an immediate future. How the country can lead and make a gas transition a success.
Let's move forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
Please, thank you so much. And please, before answering to your question, please allow me to thank you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, for such a great speech, which is not relevant just for today's conversation or for this region, but I think it was full of lessons and recommendations and a vision that if it's implemented not just in this region, but in all regions, I will argue, and I am a lawyer, so I argue with success, the world will be a much better place. So thank you so much, and I think that's not a speech, it's a vision that should be looked at very, very carefully for all and each of us. Now to your question, if you allow me to share with you some thoughts from my humble experience coming from a European country.
Yes, you are from Romania.
Yes, from a country.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Just to tell the audience, I'm from Bulgaria, and we, in a way, we went through our own version of this transition from post-communist energy economy to something else.
And I will add of what you're saying, how we argue in Brussels, for example, to leave it at the member states, and finally we got it, but along the way it was quite painful for a lot of other countries, but we were right, and I'm very proud to say that the voice from our region was right when it comes to the energy, because energy is not a matter of just energy, okay? As energy for your development, it's a matter of security. So I will start with a simple observation that the Middle East is not just transitioning away from oil and gas, it is racing against time, if I may put it this way, because in the Middle East, as you, Deputy Prime Minister Riley said, the energy transition is not just about changing the source of electricity. It is about changing the foundation of the economic resilience, it's about the state capacity, the institutional building, the trust, and the geopolitical influence. And above all, I think it is about the vision and the courage to not give up one dependency to replace it with another dependency. That's, I think, it's an important issue to look at. So the energy transition in the Middle East cannot be discussed separately from water security and the food security, because all of those are going together. And wasting water, which I just learned before coming to the podium, that it's something, again, looking at when it comes to the security of not wasting resources. So this goes, this now belongs to the same strategic equation, if I can say. So 3 lessons, if I may, in a very, very short, answer. The real question is not simply whether the region can deploy more renewable energy. Of course it can, okay? But the lesson will be, and the real question is whether the region can transition in a way that strengthens the state capacity and protects the citizens and reduces the strategic vulnerability. So the 3 ideas that I would like to share with you are the following. 1. It's about, I'm trying to look to my notes, I had lots of ideas here. So 1, it's energy transition must be treated as a security transition, not just as a climate strategy. And I remember from my conversation from in other parts of the world when he said that the climate change is a matter of survival. And that needs to be very seriously understood. 2nd, it's the region must decouple water security from hydrocarbon volatility. That's another very important issue, and here the experts on desalinization, obviously they can talk more about it. And 3rd, fiscal strategy is the bridge between the old economy and the new one. And with that, I will end here, but what we need to understand is that all those are going together, because if you have food security, if you have energy security, you have food security. If you have food security, you have stable countries. And if you have stable countries, you have that development that is allowing us to have a better life.
Let's move to Michalis. It is very interesting because Greece, in a way, is an unexpected energy hub. I mean, LNG terminals, interconnectors, what else? The East Med debate, renewables capacity that is growing so fast. Do you think the region can build a genuine security infrastructure and architecture?
Well, thank you for the question, but actually your previous one was
Yes,
much more interesting for me to answer.
Please do.
You said, does the Middle East have a strategy about the transition? Well, who does? Nobody does. Does the European Union have a strategy for the transition? No, it doesn't. And the problem, actually, I don't see anywhere in the world where we actually have a strategy about the transition. And the reason is very simple. We don't understand the concept of strategy. Strategy, in very simple way to put it, is whatever common plans and activities you have, any organization has to secure its survival, which is the primary thing. Any living organism, its number one priority is to keep being one, keep being a living organism. And
But
this goes for states.
do you at least have a country as a good example for having at least something of a strategy?
No, really, as baffling as it sounds, the concept of strategy, of understanding that you're building something because this is crucial for your survival, for states, your survival in the system, it doesn't exist. I very often like to play with officials in Europe and with politicians when I ask them, they talk about some energy projects, and they say this is a strategic project. And I say, why? Why is it a project strategic? Just because it involves a lot of money? No. Unless a project helps a country maintain its power to deflect influence from others and to impose influence to others, it doesn't have strategic value. And you said, to keep it in the transition, you said earlier that we should move from under the ground to the sun and the wind. I think actually we should keep ourselves someplace in the middle, keep ourselves in the ground. If there is anything to see after the crisis with Russia's invasion in Ukraine and now with the conflict with Iran and the US, is that networks matter more than the sources themselves, or just as much. So we need to stay on the ground and see how we can build resilient networks. This is what will give power or help states to maintain power. Now, the transition is easier for countries who import energy because you say, well, I'm switching one source of energy with another. It has its problems, but sure. For the countries who produce energy, oil and gas namely, things are more difficult because you don't only need to transit to cleaner form of energy, you need to make the transit to another system that helps you maintain the power that you had from the resources you had. And that's not an easy task. My answer to this is that countries like Kurdistan and Iraq in total need to find a way to build networks.
What about Greece?
Well, Greece, we are happy and fast to saying that we can be an energy hub. If you think about it, all the countries in the region, in the Eastern Mediterranean, we want to be energy hubs. It's a big task. It's very difficult. We are fortunate to be in a position where major actors like the United States and the EU in total, their plans about diversifying away from Russia, they find us very well placed to create alternatives. So that's why the LNG terminals, the vertical corridor, the FSRUs in Greece, they can be very helpful to help move energy from the south to the north. And we have been fortunate to be proactive in Greece in the last 6, 7 years, something that we're not usually in Greece. So we have been prepared for this. And now we are well positioned for the structural changes that have been happening for a long time to take advantage of it. I'm talking about structural changes, and I will finish with this.
Okay.
Because what has been happening for many years is that for the United States, which is a major player now in Greece, they were in the position where all the eastern part of NATO has been under Russian influence all the past decades, and now for the first time after the end of the Cold War, the United States, they have the chance to alleviate this influence. And Greece can play a vital role in that.
I understand. So let me ask you all of these. Yes,
Can
yes,
I
just
add
one second. Yes.
one idea? Regional diplomacy, because when we talk about the security, energy security, which comes including to the human security down the line, how about the regional, the diplomatic security? Because water and food security cannot be solved only within the national borders. And I will want to introduce to all of you the notion of the resource diplomacy, because that's something that we ought to look much more carefully and much more strategically. Because, you know, strategy and strategically, yeah, I know lots of politicians are using those terms, but the ones that are using it with courage and good faith is giving you a vision that it's allowing you to build that foundation that will allow you to build that resilience that the Deputy Prime Minister was talking earlier, because the resilience is the key in all of it.
Okay, so I'm very fascinated by a book I read yesterday. I started with this, and I want to ask you something. Lawrence Friedman ends his book about strategy with a warning. He says that strategy fails more often, not because people choose the wrong goal, but because there is underestimated resistance from the real world. So, in a way, the energy transition everywhere faces extraordinary resistance, friction, political friction, institutional friction, even physical friction, of course. So my question is, what is the biggest single source of resistance to energy transition that you see, that you face, and is anyone actually addressing it?
لڕاستیدا بابەتی گۆڕانکاری لە وزەدا من ئاماژەم بە خاڵێکدا و بەڕێزەش ئاماژەی بە خاڵێکی جەوهەری زۆر گرنگدا ئەگەر لە سەدەکانی ڕابردوودا سامان و هێزی مرۆڤایەتی یعنی سامان و هێزی ئێمە وەکو وڵاتانی جیهان لەژێر زەوی بوو بێ لە ئێستادا ئەو سامان و هێزە لەسەر زەویە کەواتە تێڕوانینی کۆمەڵگەکانی دنیا بۆ چۆنیەتی ئیدارەدانی ئەم سامان و هێزە لە ئێستادا بۆ ئەو گۆڕانکاریانی کە لە پێشمانەوەیە ئەمە زۆر گرنگە ئێمە چۆن دەتوانین لە ئاڵوگۆڕ و لە گۆڕانکاریەکاندا هاوبەشیەکی هەرێمی لەگەڵ یەکتریدا دروست بکەین بۆ ئەوەی جارێکی تر بتوانین بەهێزێکی گشتگیرتر و بەهێزێکی ڕوونتر بینەوە ناو پانتایی پارێزگاریکردن لە مافی هەر یەکێک لەو گەلانەی کە ئێستا سەرچاوەی ئەساسی وزەن لە ناوچەکەدا ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاستێکە لە ناوچەکانی کە زۆرترین ینی بڵێن سەرچاوەی وزەی تێدایە بۆ نمونە لە نەوت و گازدا بەڵام لەگەڵ ئەوەشدا تۆ کە باز لە نەوت و گاز دەکەی بە دڵنیاییەوە دەبێت دوو عنسوڕێکی تری سەرەکی کە بەبەتی ئاسایشی ئاوە قەت لە یادی نەکەی کەواتە ئێمە لە گۆڕانکاریەکانی کە دێنە پێشەوە بۆ ئەوەی کە بتوانین جارێکی تر استراتیژی خۆمان بۆ ئایندەدا بڕێژینەوە کۆمەڵگەی نێودەوڵەتی بە شێوازێکی گشتی و وڵاتانی ناوچەکە لەگەڵ یەکتریدا پێویستمان بەداڕشتنەوەی سیاسەتێکی گشتگیرتر هەیە بۆ چۆنیەتی ئیدارەدانی مەلەفی وزە ئەو وزەیە کە لە ڕابردوودا سەرچاوەی خێر و بەرەکەت بووە بۆ بەشێک لە کۆمەڵگەکانی ناوچەکە لە ئێستادا ئەم وزەیە ڕاستە بۆ نمونە ئێستا بەکارهێنانی نەوت لە زۆربەی وڵاتانی دنیادا لە ڕووی بەکارهێنانەوە کەمی نەکردوێتەوە بەڵام لەگەڵ ئەوەشدا بەشێکی زۆری وڵاتانی ناوچەکە و کۆمەڵگەکانی دنیا بەدیلی شێوازی بەکارهێنانی سەرچاوەکاندا دەگەڕێن بۆ ئەوەی کە بتوانن بە شێوازێک بەکاری بهێننەوە لە چوارچێوەی ئەو تەکنەلۆژیا تازەی کە ئێستا کۆمەڵگەکانی دنیا بنیادی ئایندەی خۆیانی لەسەر دەنێنەوە کەواتە من جەخت لەسەر هاوبەشە هەرێمیەکان دەکەمەوە لەگەڵ یەکتریدا بە ئەوەی بتوانین لە گۆڕانکاریەکانی یاخود لە گواستنەوەی وزە لە چۆنیەتی بەکارهێنانی گواستنەوەی وزە لەگەڵ یەکتریدا بتوانین هاوبەشی تەواوەتی بکەین و بتوانین بنەمایەکی دروست و استراتیژیەکی پتە بۆ ئەم گواستنەوەیە دابڕێژین.
The biggest single source of resistance?
I believe bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy?
Yes. And I do agree with the gentleman there that there is no strategy. Everybody has an idea. For example, European Union invested billions in EV to diversify the transport sector. But if you take from well to wheel, we just added more gas and coal to be burned to run the vehicles.
I understand.
Our brains sometimes are in our eyes. What we see as a beautiful car, clean, there is no CO2 emissions. But that car needs to be charged. So when you charge it, you've just burned more coal and more gas. So if you take it from well to wheel, we didn't add any solution. We just made from, as you said, we replaced a dependency to another dependency. So a strategy needs to be firm, needs to be black, white, no gray area, and it needs a very firm leadership as well. For example, the transition in China is somehow, to my opinion, is more successful than transition in Europe. In Europe, we have more bureaucracy. And that sometimes can lead to a delay of an energy transition. And energy transition, it's a need and needs to be commercially feasible before anything else. For example, in Gulf countries, they have deep pockets. They can subsidize this transition. But in Iraq, we can't subsidize a transition.
Let me ask you something about this, because what do you think, what concrete steps is the Kurdistan region taking to make sure what you say, that the transition revenues from oil and gas actually build institutional capacity rather than simply sustaining a rentier model
state, yes.
until water runs dry?
Yeah. Well, when you make a policy, you have indicators. And it's beautiful. In Iraq, for example, if I ask this room, what's the GDP of Iraq? This is a number nobody can agree on. So when you have a GDP or an idea what the GDP is, you try to increase that GDP to make less dependent on oil. How you make that? You try to, because we have a beautiful resource, which is the youth.
Yes.
Create
very beautiful resource,
Yes.
when we look from the European perspective.
Yes. So we like to have more jobs, economic diversification. These are all beautiful targets. But how you lead to that is the question. I believe in the region that we are here now, in Iraq in general, Iraq has a very rich resource of oil and gas. And happen to be that Slemani area represents currently 50% of Iraq's total gas production.
50?
Yes.
Which is a good or a bad thing?
That's a very good. That's very good, because that led to electricity, because the transition is not only a challenge, but it's also a service. We are all public servants. We like to serve our people to what we promise them. So basic needs of 24 electricity is completely based on gas supply. We have successfully increased our gas production in 4 years' time by 120%. In 4 years' time.
I understand.
And that gas can lead also to more industry. And that industry, for example, if the Kurdish cement bag or the Kurdish steel factories and cement factories can compete on a global level, that is a big transition. So we used gas to have cheap energy so we can have more industrial power and more export than only oil.
Single act of resistance for Romania, especially a country with geopolitical sensitive position, a NATO frontline state, a country with its own reserves in the Black Sea and so on and so on.
Well, before talking about Romania, just to second everything was said, but the most, the negative that I see it is the lack of trust. So instead of looking at the negative, I will turn it to a positive. I think the biggest opportunity is rebuilding the trust. So if we speak from the European perspective, you and I know that Romania and Bulgaria, as I said earlier, we've been arguing at the Brussels level to leave, when it comes to the energy transition, leave it to the member states, because look, as much as I love in Romania to have solar or wind, we don't have it at the same level as in Greece. But we do have the mixture of the nuclear. For example, we have a long-term production of nuclear energy, which is one of the safest and most affordable sources of energy, and clean, I will argue. So what I'm saying here is try to rebuild the trust among the states, among the industries, But likewise, here it's the other lesson. Learn from the mistakes in the past to build the present and the future. And one is the courage, because you are talking about the visionary and the strategy. Yes, there are strategies, there are visions. What is lacking is the courage to implement those. And that's why I believe that this region, if it has, not just the region, but overall, have the courage to invest in new technologies that, while at the beginning might sound very expensive, because investing in a new technology, obviously, at the beginning it's expensive, but when you do the math, and math is very simple, then you will see that that source of energy is one among the cheapest. So that's why I believe that this region has a huge, huge opportunity to come from being perceived mainly as a global energy supplier to actually becoming a global provider of climate adaptation technologies, if you are investing in those new technologies.
I have a question specifically for Greece, because from my point of view as a neighboring country, Greece has invested significantly in becoming an energy bridge. But bridges, by definition, what we've learned in school, serve others people's interests as much as their own. So what is Greece's position? Can it be an energy secure nation while building bridges?
I like that you keep asking me about Greece, and I always want to answer the previous question because I always find more interesting. I'll do both. But I need to stay in the resistance for the transition. On the surface, there are a lot of things that bring resistance to the transition. On the bottom line, on a structural level, is national interest. And we have to understand that transition doesn't work for each country alone. Eventually, you need to cooperate with your neighbors. Because let's say you build wind and solar, you reach 40–45% of renewables, like Greece has done, and then what? You have more energy that you need connections with your neighbors, which means that you need cooperation, which means that you need to find common ground in national interest. And this is where things begin to not work. Because, I mean, now I'll keep it in Europe. Greece and Romania, we have the vertical corridor for natural gas.
Yes.
Maybe not, right? Well, we would like to believe that we have common interests, national interests, up to a point we have. However, Romania, for example, they have their own production, gas production coming up 2027 strong. They would rather push their own gas into the system than having United States gas running through the system. You have a conflict there. When things doesn't work on a national interest level, it will not work on the projects. But we tend to plan energy projects from an economical perspective, and eventually we hit the wall when national interests don't match together. This goes for electricity cables, for renewable investments from one country to another, and for gas. So I think eventually we need to start reprogramming our minds and start planning our energy transition and our energy strategy overall, beginning with where do we have common national interests and how can we serve them through energy.
I understand.
So.
Final question. Yes, just 1 second, please. 30 seconds.
To give you an answer to what you said, I don't think it's a conflict of interest. I think if you just look from the national lenses, that's wrong. If you look at that's why I was advocating to go at the regional level, because I think with that supply, you could actually, we could, not you as a country, we as a region could be the energy security provider for other countries within the region. So that's actually complementing, as my British husband will say, 2 + 2 makes 5, if we are understanding that.
Okay, final question. We will start with you to finish with your final remarks. Energy transitions that we talk about are not cost-free. I mean, they displace workers. They raise energy prices, obviously, in a short term. They require populations to absorb change. Who should pay the price?
We all should. We all should. The thing with the energy transition is we need to understand that it's not an easy task. It's almost an impossible task, and it's a costly task. However, we do it for one specific reason. Climate change and global warming. That's the one thing. Everything else is noise. And this is fundamental for humanity. So it's way too big a problem to actually not be willing to pay for it. And eventually, everybody needs to pay. Now, the form of how this is going to be distributed, it's very different because the energy transition, networks, batteries, renewables, eventually they go through what we know in the bills like the regulated costs. So this is the part of the bill that you actually, as a consumer, you do not control. When you build a new electricity network, this goes, is distributed to all the consumers. So that is a problem because it makes sense that consumers have to pay for energy and the networks and all the system. However, because these networks have a strategic meaning, it needs to be distributed to all the taxpayers rather than who pays and who consumes each part of energy.
Who pays the price?
Nobody should pay the price. I will argue everybody should share the burden because I think we should go to one simple truth, that the future belongs not to those who produce energy, but to those who understands to build resilience. So that means resilience in the economy, resilience in institutions, and practically resilience when it comes to the ability to secure not just energy for every citizen, because you know what, energy is not a luxury. Energy is a basic human right, if we are looking from that point of view. So secure the water, secure the food, and secure the opportunity practically for the future generations. And I think that's our duty, to live a better world than we inherited.
Thank you.
Well, I disagree. It sounds very ideal. Nobody should pay the price, but at the end we all pay. And it is not fairly shared as well. So you have we all share the same air. If you are in China or you are in Kurdistan or you are in US. So the climate change is the biggest challenge and everybody pays. And I believe consumers, I agree with that. The consumers at the end, they pay the price.
Your Excellency, we will finish the panel with you, and I will add just one thing about ordinary people. Are they owed something in return for paying the price as well?
بەدڵنیایی و کەسانی ئاسایی شایانی ئەوە نین باجی ئەو گۆڕانکاریە بدەن بەڵام ئەمە وەکو ئاماژەم پێدا گۆڕانکاریەکی ژنگەی گەورەیە کە لەسەر ئاستی جیهان زۆربەی ناوچەکان دەگرێتەوە و ئەم گۆڕانکاریانە چ گۆڕانکاری کەش و هەوا بێت چ گۆڕانکاریە ژینگەیەکان سنوور ناناسێت کەواتە کەسێکی ئاسایی ینی بەرپرسیار نییە لەوەی کە چۆن باجی ئەم گۆڕانکاریە دەدا بەڵکو ئەو کەسانەی کە دەتوانن ڕەوشەکە ئاراستە بکەن بە داڕشتنی ئەو استراتیژانەی کە کاریگەریەکان کەم دەکەنەوە ئەوان دەبێ باجی ئەم گۆڕانکاریە ژینگەیە بدەن چکە مەسئولیەت لەسەرشانی ئەو کەسانەیە کە ئاراستەی دۆخەکە دەکەن بە ئاراستەیەکدا کە بگونجێت لەگەڵ بەرژەوەندی گشتی و خەڵکی ئاسایی و سڤیلیش بتوانێت سوودی لێ ببینێ نەک ئەو کەسانەی کە لە ڕاستیدا خاوەنی چۆنیەتی ئیدارەدان و بەڕێوەبردننی مەلەفەکان بەڵام لە ئەساسدا ناتوانن بەرپرسیارەتەکە لە دۆخەکەدا هەڵبگرن چکە ئەم تێڕوانینە تێڕوانینێکی گشتگیرە و تێڕوانینێکە بۆ ئەوەی کە ئێمە بتوانین سوود لە قۆناغەکانی گواستنەوەی وزە وەربگرین کەواتە دەبێت ینی بەرپرسیارەتەکە هاوبەش بێ و لە هەمان کاتیشدا ڕێکارەکانی گرتنەبەری بۆ چۆنیەتی گواستنەوەی وزە لەسەر خەڵکی سڤیل نەبێتە باجێکی گەورە.
Correct. It was an honor to be with you. Thank you so much for this panel. Thank you.